Any second now. And the recording is live. Hello, welcome back to Game Design Online. This is part 6. Part 6 not as advertised. This is meant to be what comes next, which was the final segment of Game Design Online 2020. But when I came to redo it, well, actually, I put a little slide in about this. I realized that I was, basically this was, the session I planned was not as much about game design as it should have been. It was more about, the commercial side of things, getting your game sold, all of that. And it made me realize that when I thought back to Seminar 1, one of the ruinous myths I put in was about you don't have to make commercial games. You don't have to make games with a view to selling them at the end. So it kind of felt disingenuous to have this as the 6th seminar. So I've rewritten this one, and instead we're now focusing on tying up loose ends. So I'm going to give you some more tips and tricks about keeping your projects moving, finishing off projects, overcoming barriers and issues and that sort of stuff. Just basically, this session is a toolkit of hopefully useful things that you can use. What I will do is I will still record the hello Jamie, thank you for joining us, and Martin, hello. I will still record the seminar I was going to do about what you can do once you finish the game, and I'll add that to the video playlist, and then you can have that as well. Tonight's one is more about actually, how to get that game to that point where it's finished. So of course, welcome back. This is part 6 of Game Design Online. We've gone through 5 parts so far. We've gone through the basics of what game design is. We talked about our game design process. We talked about some horrible myths that stop people from being good at game design. We've talked about starting a game design project, getting ideas out of your head and onto the table, finding inspiration, that kind of thing. We talked about playtesting in quite a lot of detail. We talked about rules writing in quite a lot of detail across 2 sections, initially talking about just the act of rules writing, really, and what matters and why it's important. And then we talked about structure and formatting and headings and all sorts of things last week. This week, as I say, it was going to be about what happens when you finish the game, but actually I think it's more useful to everyone if I talk about some more stuff about getting your game finished. So this week we're going to talk a bit about the specific steps for writing a rules manuscript. So it kind of follows on from the end of last session. We're going to talk about troubleshooting. So when you get to the point in the project where you just hit a brick wall, what do you do next? And I'm going to talk some stuff about feedback and how to get good at taking feedback, because that is always difficult. There's just a quick reminder of our process. I'm sure you're bored of this slide by now, but we have a 6-part process. We kick things off. We do some research. We build a test build, which is the very central core of the game. My green screen is going weird this week. Never mind. We then do a mechanical build where we kind of broaden it and we add detail to the start and end of the game. And then we add depth and polish with the full build. And then we hand it over and do any amends and that sort of thing. Most importantly, this is just our process. There's no such thing as a standard way of doing this. You are absolutely welcome and encouraged to do it your own way. All I can do is give you a nice framework to start you off. And as ever, if you have questions, pop them in the chat. If you've got big topics, save them for the end, and we'll have a little chat in Discord and get involved as much as you would like. So let's get going, shall we? Writing the first draft of a manuscript. This is something that I wish I was taught when I first got started doing game design and rules writing. This is something which it's a very specific part of the process, and it comes at the very end. And there's a lot of stuff in here that you shouldn't worry about until you get to that end stage. This section is about the transition point between the mechanical draft and the mechanical build and the full build. So in the mechanical build, you've created like a rules reference where you've codified all your rules and got them all written down nice and neatly, and you've developed that through testing and you've polished it. You've made it quite comprehensive. This is about where you start creating a manuscript. And really the aim here is to create a document. This is where you're creating the documentation for your game. So your game should be already designed by this point. You're now just going to explain to people how to do it. And as we said before, this will have to be a teacher. It'll have to be a reference. It'll potentially have to be a storyteller as well. So the transition point from the mechanical rules reference to the full rulebook manuscript is what we're talking about here. And what you're not going to do is copy things directly over. We'll talk about why that is in a minute. And then once you've finished that draft, of course, your first draft of your manuscript, you will then go and play test it, because playtesting doesn't finish until the game is completely done. So what is a manuscript? To be clear, it's the rules document for your full rule prototype. As I just said, it's a teacher reference, a storyteller, and it is the full text of your final rule book. So when you have a rule book in your hand that is out of a boxed game you've bought from a shop, before that gets laid out into that form, it would have existed as a manuscript, as just a Word document or similar, with just the text and potentially some diagrams and things put in there, and that will be laid out by a graphic designer to create the final finished piece. But what you're doing is you're looking to create the full text. So you're going to include color text, you're going to include examples, you're going to include all the little touches that you'd expect to see in a rulebook. And of course, that will vary from game to game, and only you can say exactly what should go in your rulebook. But as we talked about last week, there are some things that probably should go in, and you have to really think carefully about omitting them, really. But we had a full list in last week's seminar, so feel free to go back and look over that at your leisure. So some things to remember. As I just said, the manuscript needs to include everything. As the point I kind of laboured last week was, it needs to be well structured. Structure is going to signpost players through your document and help them understand it. Your first draft of this will not be perfect, and trying to make it perfect will just slow you down. This is actually one of the biggest lessons I think I've learned as a writer, is get things onto the page and then come back and refine them later. Because if you try to, if you agonize over every word, every paragraph, every line, you'll get nowhere. You'll get to the end of a page and you'll be sick to death of writing. So don't try making your first draft of anything perfect, least of all your manuscript. At this point, you should be trying to avoid making gameplay changes, because, as I say, you're creating documentation for your game. You wouldn't write the documentation for how to build a piece of IKEA furniture before the IKEA furniture had been designed. If you're making changes while writing a manuscript, you've probably started writing it too soon. That's an indicator of the point at which you should be doing this part of the process. So be ready to, if you find yourself making changes, stop, go back and carry on designing. So I've now got a multi-step system. I think it's 9 steps. There we go. There's an 8 twice. It's 8.5. Let's call it 9 steps for creating your manuscript first draft. So let's have a look at what those are, shall we? First of all, you're going to get that mechanical build rules document and you're going to dissect it. You're going to pull it apart and analyze it. And I recommend printing it out on paper or using a second screen if you've got a 2-screen setup or a tablet or something with a document on. Because what you're going to want to be doing throughout this entire process is you're going to be wanting to refer to both your mechanical build rules reference and the manuscript that you're writing. Okay, so you'll get your thing, print it out or have it on a second screen, and you're going to read through it from start to finish. It can help to have taken a little bit of a break before doing this, so a little bit of time away from your game, because what you'll find is that if you've been really invested in writing and rewriting this constantly, you'll read through it and you'll miss stuff. You will not look at it with fresh eyes and things will come past you. So have a little break, come back to it and start reading through it. As you do this, you're going to be doing 2 things. First of all, you're going to be listing your sections. So last week we talked about sections in quite a lot of detail. Talked about how when you're structuring your document, your sections will each cover a single topic, and you'll have subsections in those sections which cover subtopics of that topic. So here you're going to identify your sections. Now you might already have them nicely spread out with nice headers and things that you've built into your mechanical build rules reference. If not, you can start adding them in here and kind of making notes of where different headers are and all that sort of thing. So you're creating a list of all your sections. The most important thing is to make a list, start to finish, of all your sections. Then you're also going to highlight every rules term that comes up whenever it's used. If you remember from last week, a rules term is any word or phrase that you're giving more meaning in your rules text than it would have in common use. So action is a very common one. Action is often a rules term. So you're going to do that. So you're going to make a list on a separate piece of paper of all your sections, and you're going to go through and highlight your rules terms. Get a highlighter pen, use the highlighter function on your word processor, whatever it might be. So once you've done this, you've dissected your rules document. You're then going to plan a framework. So we talked last week about structural hierarchies. Remember, I had like a lovely little bullet pointed list of things with your level 1, level 2, level 3 things kind of netted inside each other. You're going to do that for your rules document. Now, this is your chance to put things in the right order, because chances are when you did the mechanical build rules reference, I need to make sure I'm using the right terminology. When you made your mechanical build rules reference, you probably didn't think too much about the order in which things go. You probably had a few thoughts about structure, but I specifically told you, one of the ignorables, don't think too much about the order things are going in. This is your chance to do that. So start thinking, right, for each section, where should it go? Remember that there's that 4-part sequence you talked about last time. So you start off with your introduction, like introduce players to the game, your core mechanics, how to play the most basic version of the game, additional rules, and then back matter. So back matter being the reference. Remember that and put things in order, and think about your sections. Each section is a topic. Anything that belongs underneath that topic is a nested subtopic. That's a separate subsection within that. Take some time doing this. Don't rush through it. And once you've done it, take a break and then come back and review. This whole process, the process of making a manuscript, is not a thing you should be dashing through. It's not a short process. Once you come back to it, ask yourself, does each section have a coherent topic? Your top level sections, remember, are going to be your chapter headings. Does it make sense the way those chapters have been divided? Okay. Are your subtopics properly nested inside their parent topics? And don't forget, subtopics can have subtopics as well. You could have 3 or 4 levels, even 5 levels sometimes. And ask yourself, have you included all the necessary elements? When we talked about in the previous seminar about the 4-part sequence, I went through and listed for each one of those 4 parts a bunch of topics that should be in there. For example, we had in the introduction, you had a mechanical overview, you had a thematic overview, you had a components list and a setup kind of thing. I think sorry, setup was in core mechanics, wasn't it? But yes, you've got all that stuff in there. Is that in there? Did you have it in your mechanical build document? You probably did if you were doing lots of playtesting. If it was missed, hopefully someone would have picked it up. But just double check that everything's in there now. And if something is missing, make sure that is a deliberate omission and not just one that you've forgotten to include. Once you've planned your framework, here's where you start actually creating the document. So this is vital. You're going to create a new document. What we don't do is take our mechanical build rules reference and rewrite it into the manuscript, because doing that has all sorts of risks with it. And really what you need to do here is you need to go through the entire text with a fine-tooth comb. You need to rewrite it from scratch, because if you reuse old text, you're going to find old bits of terminology creeping in. You're going to find ambiguities and things that have kind of that you've maybe made clearer in their context, but by removing them from that context, they become unclear. You'll also find vestigial rules which you may have taken a rule out in version 3.5, and by version 4.9, which is where you start doing your manuscript, that rule has been gone for a long time, but there's still something that refers to it within your rules text. And unless you rewrite from scratch, you risk leaving that in. I have seen many published rule books that have clearly made this mistake, and they've taken their mechanical reference that they've used through testing and they've never rewritten it, and things creep in that have no place being there. So start a new document and save it. Proper file names, manuscript version 1.0, whatever it might be. This is your manuscript, and you're now going to recreate that structural hierarchy you've made. 1 header per line. Don't do bullet points, just do 1 line at a time. So introduction, hit return. Component list, hit return. Then if you're using Word, you've got the whole heading and style system. Google Docs has the same thing. I'm sure pretty much, I think OpenOffice has the same thing. Any word processing system you use will have a system for creating a hierarchy of headers. You'll have heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and so on and so forth. Use those formatting tools to get all of your headings correct. And also, this is an opportunity if you want. It won't matter unless No, to be fair, it does matter. It's good to put some thought into the look of things, even if this is going to be relayed out by a graphic designer. I still like to make sure that my heading 1 is nice and big and bold. My heading 2 is slightly smaller. My heading 3 is slightly smaller than that. And don't just go on font size. Make some actual changes. One is underlined. One is small capitals. One is in bold. Whatever it is you need to do, make sure your header levels are nice and delineated. To be clear, you're not including any text at this point. You're just including your headings. Okay. And what you'll do is basically you'll create the framework for a document, a skeleton, and then you can start writing into that. Before you do, take a moment, just look at it and make sure the nesting all looks right, like it's making sense. Then, before you start writing, you can create a lexicon. I've talked about these before. It's where we're going to kind of codify our rules terms and make sure we've got a reference for how they should be working. So you're going to create a spreadsheet or a table in a new document. You can use Word, you can use Excel, you can use Google Sheets, whatever it might be. Save it again. Make sure you save it first, and then make sure you save it throughout. And what you want to do is in your first column, you list your rules terms one at a time. And you went through and highlighted them in your rules reference. So it's just a case of going through and just copying them across one at a time. Make sure that they're all, once they're all in, get them correctly formatted. So decide on what formatting system you're going to use. Are you going to capitalize your rules terms? Are you going to put some of them in bold? Are you going to put component terms in one format and other things in another thing? Whatever you do, make sure it is here and it is complete, because this is going to be the thing you're going to use to apply that to everything else. In the second column, you're going to explain the meaning of the term, and in the third column, you're going to list any incorrect alternate forms. So the example I always use, I often say damage token. And then in my third column, it will be damage marker, damage counter, whatever, things that it's not, but I know that I will probably mix up and use. Also, if you've developed your game over time and you've changed any terminology, make sure you list any old terms in that third column. So, for example, if you've had a thing where you have, you have gold tokens and they become currency tokens. Currency tokens in your first column and put gold tokens in your third, just in case at any point you have written an old term because you had a little brain fart and you've regressed slightly. And then once you're done, sort that spreadsheet alphabetically by the first column, so you've got an alphabetical list of all your rules terms. Save it, close it, you're done. Here's an example of one. This is the lexicon. This isn't the final one. I couldn't find the final one. This is a work in progress lexicon from Hellboy the board game. So you can see there, I've got the first one is all my rules terms. So action, for example, is a rules term. I've capitalized the A. That's important. It's not bolded. I was experimenting with a thing here where all the component terms were bolded. So action cube, agent card, backup agent card, board. Those are all components. Although actually board isn't a component. So that's a mistake on the lexicon. But I've bolded those, so I'll make sure that whenever I go through the text, they will match the formatting there. Some things don't have capitals, so advance and assist, they're verbs, they're rules verbs, and I decided those didn't need capital letters, but rules nouns did. Maybe I was thinking in German at the time, who knows? But I think that my meaning, and that's just really, it's notes to yourself. It doesn't need to be particularly clear, although you can use this as the basis of a glossary if you want to, down the line. And then I've got my don't uses. So action cube, it's not action token, not action marker, not action counter. Advance, in a previous version, the rules increase. So I put increase there. Agent, hero model, miniature character, and so on and so forth. So lots of things that I didn't want to use instead of that first one there. Area, yes. Zone, square, space, no. If you've got a game with any kind of grid on it, it's really, really easy to use the wrong word. Make sure you use it consistently. If you say square, always say square. If you say space, always say space. If you say hex, always say hex. Consistency is key, and a lexicon will help you maintain that consistency going forward. Then it's time to start writing. This is a really simple slide for what is the biggest part of the process. So you're now going to go through your headings one at a time from start to finish. In the mechanical build, we said with your rules reference, you haven't got to write it in order. You can start in the middle and kind of work out. Don't do that here, because what really matters is that you're keeping track of so player's mental load, like we talked about last time. So for example, if a rules term is used, you want to make sure that you are explaining it the first time that it is used. You're not saving that for later. So you need to write this from start to finish so that you can track that, so you can be aware of things you've written. For each heading that you get to, go to the corresponding section or sections of your mechanical build rules document, read through it, and write that section from scratch. Rewrite it completely. Do not copy and paste things, because again, errors will sneak in. So you are writing everything here. Don't worry about focusing on formatting rules terms. Don't worry about adding in diagrams and things. You can use placeholders if you need to. If, for example, you're one of the things I often do, I often collaborate with someone. I get someone else to write color text box outs for me because it's not my strong suit. I can write little bits of narrative, but it's not really my preference. So I will often put insert color text here, talking about this, and then I'll get someone else to go and write 50 words, 100 words, whatever it might be, and slot it in later. So yeah, just focus on the writing, go on it, take your time, save regularly. Autosave if you can, use an autosave thing. I've lost too many documents to save problems. Something like Google Drive is great for that because you can, autosave as it goes. Google Drive has slightly less good formatting options than Word, so I'm still stuck on Word to a degree, but there are lots of options out there. But yeah, like I say, this is going to be the longest part of the process, but it's the part that looks the simplest on the slide because it's just write the thing. As a side note, I just talked about kind of skipping and leaving placeholders and things. Flags are what we call any little notes we make to our future self in the document. Anyone who's done any coding, you'll be familiar with that inline commenting. Basically, stuff that you can add to yourself that you can come back and check later for any reason. You can use, so Word or Docs has a comments section. You can press Control-Alt-M and add a comment to a piece of text, or you can highlight it with the highlighter pen function. And the things that we tend to flag, we tend to have one color for anything that's a placeholder. So usually we use a light blue for that. So that's if, for example, we've got something non-final, we haven't decided on the name of a character or the name of a mission, or there's some color text or whatever it might be. This is a placeholder, and we'll finish it off later. We use magenta for that. That's it. Then we use cyan for anything you'll need to insert later. So, for example, insert diagram here, insert box out here, that sort of thing, where it's a note to kind of the person who's laying the book out potentially, or if you're going to add some things, it's a note to you for later. Also, we use green for anything we need to check later. So this is usually, again, we check it after layout. So things like page numbers. Whenever we say, see page whatever, at this stage, we'll write page, and I'll do two @ symbols in a row because that will never turn up in a document of its own accord. So at the end, I can go through Control F for @ and I will find all the page numbers and I can replace them with actual page numbers. But if I put that flag in, it means that I can come back later and check that the information there is correct. Also, positional text, things like see the diagram to the right or see the diagram below, to the left, whatever. It's very common when you're writing in a word processor, you're going to just say as explained below, because from your point of view, everything later is below. If it's not below in the text, don't say below, say on page, whatever. And similarly, if you say the diagram to the left and it gets laid out and the diagram's now on the right, that's a thing you need to be checking. So make sure you always flag up your positional text to be checked later. Cool. So once you've written the thing, you can then create your diagrams. So any placeholders you put in that called for diagrams, you can now create those. It's really important to get diagrams in rulebooks. Diagrams make things a lot clearer. And you can do this however you like. There are loads of ways. If you're feeling techie, you can use some graphic software. You can use Illustrator or Photoshop, Paint if you want to. Jervis Johnson, who I used to work with at Games Workshop, put loads of diagrams in the Age of Sigmar books. They started off as word art. He just used Word and would make battle plan layouts with word art, which is fantastic. The point is, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It only has to be clear. As I think I've said before, Sophie from Needy Cat generally will lay things out, take a photo and put little bits of paper annotating things, take a photo of that and just slap that into the rulebook. Hasn't got to be pretty. It just has to work. Because generally this is here so that you can make things clear for your testers. That will eventually be recreated professionally by someone who's good at that kind of thing. You can put these things straight into the document. Don't worry, if you're putting images in Word, it's not as bad as it used to be. The world doesn't end when you try moving an image in Word anymore. Things are generally a little bit more controlled. But if you are still concerned about that, you can just say, insert diagram 3 and then have a separate folder with all of your numbered images, or refer to diagram 3, and your testers can look at the separate document if they want to. So at this point, you've done your first draft, right? But before you say you're done, just check your work. Go back through your mechanical rules document. Because you haven't copied and pasted, because you've copied things across one section at a time, you just want to make sure that you haven't missed anything out. So read through that document, and as you go through it, cross off each topic or each idea, each thing that's in there, cross it off and make sure it is in your manuscript, okay? Make any amendments to your manuscript that are necessary, and now you've got your first draft of your manuscript. All you need to do is go back through and apply the formatting to your rules terms. So I said, don't worry about it earlier. Now's the time. Go back to your lexicon and just go through one step at a time, find your rules terms and make sure they've got the right format. If you want, you can use find or search functions to check for it. So for example, you search for Action Cube and make sure every instance of Action Cube is there. Be careful. Don't accidentally, get lost in what you're doing and accidentally start formatting words which are that set of words but aren't rules terms. And in fact, it is always best if you're using a rules term, don't use that term anywhere else in the rulebook. So if you have the word action, don't use action in any context other than that. My favorite one for that is move. If you have a rules term that is move, which is often the case in any kind of miniatures game, there's going to come a time when you talk about moving a miniature, and it might not be rules term move, it might be the act of picking up and moving. And there are very few other words that work in that context, which is why I keep writing games with the word maneuver in, which is great because I hate the word maneuver. But yeah, cool. Go through, get your formatting into the document, and then finally, take a little break. Then come back, read through it again from start to finish. Make note. Don't make changes until you're finished. Make little notes. There'll be things you've missed, little bits and pieces, things you've left out, whatever else. Check your flags, then save a new version, make your amends. You have now got a first draft of your manuscript. It's quite a big job, but it's worth doing properly. And now you can take that and put it into your testing cycle. So you will play a game with it yourself in closed testing. You will try reading through one page at a time, following it as a new player would. You're not going to get quite the same experience because you already know a lot of things, but you can check that everything is maybe in order, and you'll probably see some things and make some iterations. So you'll play test, you'll observe, and you'll analyze your observations, and you'll iterate. And you're going to repeat that. And then you're going to go into guided testing. And from there, you're going to go into unguided testing and so on and so forth. All the stuff that we've already talked about before. But all of that will get you a nice, solid starting point for your manuscript. And from there, you can keep on polishing and refining. So, any questions on that at all? Quite a lot of stuff to cover there, but any questions? Fire away. I'm just going to blow my nose. And I'm back. Sorry, remarkably dry in this room tonight. So no questions. I will move on to the next section. This section is about troubleshooting. I included this because it's one of the things that I get asked quite a lot. I do a fair bit of mentoring with game designers. Done it through the Tabletop Mentorship Program for a few years, which incidentally, you look up the Tabletop Mentorship Program. It's really good. If you want a link, drop me a line. I'll send you a link to it. They match up people in the games industry who have got experience with people who haven't got experience in a particular field, and that they'll mentor them. I've mentored, I think, 5 people in total now. Stayed in touch with most of them, and one of my favorite things is helping them get past blockages, because you'll have things where people hit a point on a creative project, any creative project, and will realize that they don't know where to turn or what to do next, and that can be so massively disheartening. And I've been there many times. I've had, many projects where, I've tried proceeding down a particular route. I've tried developing it a certain way. And it feels like I'm just hitting a brick wall and I don't know what to do. And so this is basically a list of things that I have developed to go through, questions I can ask myself. And now you can ask yourselves to find out if you're coming up against any of these common issues, and you can just kind of jump over them. The sooner you recognize these things, the sooner you can fix them and get back on top of your project. So here we go. This is a fully printable slide. It's the Help My Game Won't Work checklist. Here are a bunch of checkpoints that you can run through one at a time. And I'll go through all of these in detail now. If your game is not working, by which I mean you've tried testing it or developing it, whatever it is, it's not going the way you want it to, and you don't know what your next step should be. When we talked about playtesting, we said that the ideal playtest should leave you with some clear actions and a clear direction for where to go next. If you find yourself after a couple of sessions unable to say where you should go next, then this is a good list to come back to. I would recommend always laminating this list. I've got a copy on my wall up there, and it's not quite as pretty as this one. It's certainly not as scrappy, but it is very, very handy. So let's go through these. We've got, did you do your research? Have you checked the brief? Are you ignoring the ignorables? Are you playtesting? Are you drilling down? Have you tried new approaches? Have you murdered your darlings? Are you being realistic? Have you set a goal? Have you taken a break? Have you asked someone else? And most importantly, are you celebrating success? So let's look at those one at a time. So have you done your research? Go do your research. How did you prepare your brain for the task of creating a game? A lot of the time, if you've hit a wall and you don't know where to go further from here, it might be that you didn't prime yourself properly. You didn't feed your brain with enough information that would let it be a fertile place for new ideas to grow. So have you played other games that are like yours? Have you played other games that are nothing like yours? It's very, very easy to get locked in and just focus on your game and stop playing everything else. Unfortunately, that means that your brain's going to run out of new ideas. You're just going to start recycling your own ideas. It is never too late to do more research. So if you're stumbling and you realize that this is a thing that you're having trouble with, just stop and go and play some games. Take a break. Go play some games. Playing more games is usually the answer to a lot of problems. And I'm not just saying that because I'm biased. Next up, we had, did you check the brief? So when you started the design project, you wrote a brief, probably, right? It's a thing we talked about at the start, and it's easy to skip it. But a brief doesn't have to be big or clever. All it has to be is something which notes down a summary of what you want the game to be. How many players are there? What should the game feel like? How big do you envision the box being? And it's important to check that from time to time. And if you haven't done so, and you are using this checklist, now's a chance to go back and look at your brief and say, what was it I wanted it to be? And what is it? Have you deviated from any points in the brief? Deviation from the brief is totally fine. It's part of the joy of having a design brief. It's just yours. You can change it wherever you like. But were those deviations intentional? It could be that you've gone down the garden path. You know, you've been testing your game, and through iteration, you've made a bunch of changes which felt really good at the time, and they've made the game better, but they veered it away from what you wanted it to be. But the game is still rooted in the thing you wanted it to be. So it will have various elements which are still very much tied to that. And so you're now getting dissonance between those two varying parts. So go back to your brief, check whether the deviations were intentional. Of course, you've been controlling the version of your game, so you've got previous versions to go back to if you need to. Of course, you've got all your idea boards that you made that you can go back to and try out different ideas. So yeah, check the brief. Next up, are you ignoring the ignorables? Because, you know, it's easy to not focus on the things that matter now and get distracted by things that come later. As I say there, choosing the wallpaper is fun, but plan the foundations first. Don't worry about what shade of blue your carpet will be if you haven't built your house yet. Remember, gameplay loop first. So your core gameplay loop, that's your test build. You're going to make that vertical slice, 5 to 10 minutes of gameplay. That's all you need to think about. Don't worry about anything else beyond that. Then broaden the scope. Make the game with a start, middle, and an end. Then add depth and refine your gameplay experience in the full build. Do it in those chunks. You've got the slides in the previous seminars. Go back, review the ignorables. There was a nice diagram I made. It's often the case. If you're getting stuck, it's because you're thinking too far ahead. Playtest. Everyone, I think, is guilty of this at some point. Saying, oh, I don't know what to do with my game. When did you last playtest it? Oh, recently. Unfortunately, it's far too easy to design a thing and then just kind of keep tinkering with it in your head and not playtesting it. Unfortunately, as we know, the cycle goes design or develop, playtest, observe, repeat. If all you're doing is designing, you're not progressing, because you only design your game and improve your game by running that cycle. And if you're just designing it without testing, you are sticking on that top one. It can be closed testing, it can be guided testing, it can be unguided, whatever it is. But the question is, when did you last play your game? And if the answer is recently, when did someone else last play your game? And if that's recently, when did someone else last play your game without your involvement? Don't fool yourself into thinking that you're testing more than you are. Be honest with yourself, okay? Play test more than you are. That's generally good advice for any game design project ever. Are you drilling down? When you get feedback after a playtest or during a playtest, are you just kind of knee-jerking and changing things immediately? Or are you stopping, asking questions, analyzing that feedback, and looking for underlying issues? If you make those kind of knee-jerk changes, then all you're doing is you're dealing with symptoms. You're fighting fires. If you get to the root cause by asking why and digging down into it, and then you're going to start making changes, you're going to deal with the issues that are actually holding your game back. And a lot of the time when I see someone saying, I keep playtesting, I keep making changes, but there are still loads of issues, it's not getting any better, it's because they're making little changes that are based on the symptoms of the problem, and they're not addressing the root cause. Next one is, are you trying new approaches? Don't get so hung up on one idea that that's all you're trying to do. Always be willing to step back. As I said right at the very start of the course, no idea is worth sacrificing your game. It could be the cleverest thing ever, but if it's not working, scrap it and try redesigning instead of redeveloping what is already there. You've got your idea boards, you've got your previous versions. Go find those things, bring them in, try something different. On a related note, murder your darlings. Can you justify the presence of all of your ideas? So every idea that's in the game, every mechanic, every rule, every component is an idea. Can you look at each one of them in turn and say, that is here because X, Y, Z? If the only reason it's in there is I really like it, or I think it's clever, which is the most dangerous one of all, then be very wary, because that is something which probably you're fond of, and your fondness has meant it's made it through more testing than it should have done. Try taking that out, or changing it for something different, something simpler maybe. Is it better or worse? If the answer is better, then that's a darling and it needs to die. If it's worse, then your game has other issues and you need to look for some root causes. Are you being realistic? Are you designing a game? Oh no, my light. Hang on. Oh, it's done so well so far. Let me just amend this. Do apologize. See, now my green screen's all messed up. Oh no. Select color. Let's do this. Let's do that. It's going to be a bit dodgy, but hey ho, I'm here. I have a bit of green behind me for the last bit of this video. Why not? Yeah. So is this are you designing a game that you are capable of designing? Have you tried to bite off more than you can chew? Is your game trying to do too much at once? That's a really, really common thing that I see. Someone tries to, for their very first game, they think, oh, I'm gonna make the new Twilight Imperium, or whatever it might be. It's gonna be the biggest, best, greatest thing ever. Don't do that. It's going to cause a whole load of issues, and it's going to mean that you're overreaching, and it's really going to harm your process, and it's going to get you down because you're going to keep hitting brick walls. Don't reinvent the wheel. I was reading a thread on Twitter recently. A bunch of game designers were chipping in, and there was this consensus that a great new game only needs 1, maybe 2 new ideas at most, because there are so many existing great ideas out there that can be recombined in different ways that make them completely different. When you create a work of art, if you want to do a painting and you want to do something novel and interesting, you don't need to redesign what paint is necessarily. You can if you want to, but you can use that as that medium that exists. In the same way, you can use the medium of deck building games or action selection or any of that. You don't have to have every single thing being unique and new. One of the joys of modern board games is there is a growing vocabulary of game ideas and rules and things that people kind of get to know. So deck building games, when Dominion came out, it was the first deck building game. Now deck building is a whole thing that people can, using their games, and people know it's a deck building game. So I'm going to start with a small deck and gradually buy cards to add to it. And there are so many ways to innovate within that idea. So the question is, if you're struggling, can you simplify your game? Can you make it simpler? Can you pull things out, streamline things, remove things? You might have 2 or 3 really good games in there. Separate them out, focus on each one as a separate thing. Set a goal. This one is very helpful. I've been with one of the guys I've been mentoring recently. We've been talking a bit about having an end goal in mind, something that you want to achieve with the game. Now, it doesn't have to be you want to get it in print. It could be I want it to be done by a certain date for a particular playtest event or a design contest. If you don't have an end date in mind or a deadline or something, you'll just say, well, it's done when it's done. And that won't help you, because it will just mean the game just meanders for a long time. You kind of circle around, and eventually you might finish it off, but you're just as likely to not. So having a deadline will help you get things done. Take a break. If you're hitting your head against the wall and it's not working, just step back, do something else. Let your brain recharge, reload other things, go and do a different project, do something entirely, play more games, and then come back, and you'll be amazed how much better it'll feel. Ask someone else. This is vital. Have you tried talking over your ideas with another designer? There are loads of game designers out there of all different levels. Find one and tell them your problems and ask them what they would do. Even just talking it over can help you reach a solution by yourself. Don't zone in and become a hermit. Don't keep your problems all to yourself. Other people will give you fresh perspectives. They'll have different biases and different things from you. They'll come up with things that you would never have thought of in a million years. There are lots of online groups you can join to get access to this. Our server on Discord is a great place. You can ask these kind of questions. But I've got some other suggestions. If you want them, let me know, and I'll send you some links. And finally, celebrate success. It's so easy to forget about the good things. When you're testing, it's easy to focus on the things that need fixing, the things that are broken, and not think about the things that work, that people enjoy, the things that are good. Be proud of those things. Take joy in having done well and having designed a game people are enjoying. If someone sits through your game and plays it and has a nice time for the majority of it, that's a hell of a success. You've brought joy to that person's life. So be proud of it. Record your successes. Note them down and look back at them when you feel, like things are going badly. If you don't do it, you're going to fatigue, you get frustrated, and you might burn out and just give up on the project. Most importantly, a lesson here from a classic movie of our time. If you have a problem, pull up. Otherwise, your X-Wing will explode. It's a metaphor. It's a visual image. Just remember Porkins. He didn't want to be in Red 6. He wanted to fly a Y-Wing. Any questions? I'm going to try turning my light back on. Hooray. There was a question from Renato. Last testing you mentioned is more testing the manuscript or still the game. Okay, yeah, cool. So yes. So I see what you're saying. So this is a question from the previous one, wasn't it? I must have missed that. Do apologize. Let me just sort out my filters here to see if I can get my my color back to what it should be. Let's select the color. So professional, James. So professional. I've still got my alien halo. Start going see-through if I do that. But if I do this, maybe. Oh my goodness. We're stuck with green, aren't we? Fine. I'll style it out. We're stuck with green. So once you've got your full draft, your first draft of the manuscript complete, then you'll go into testing. At that point, you're testing. You'll get feedback on everything. People will give you feedback on the manuscript and on the game itself. But really, at that point, what you're testing is how the manuscript conveys the game. You're going to focus mostly on unguided testing, really, because that's the thing you want to reach, because you want to see how your manuscript teaches the game and acts as a reference to the game. You will probably still get little bits of tweaks and balance for the gameplay itself. But generally, you are very much testing the manuscript first and foremost. But you can always make little tweaks. The main thing to remember is any gameplay tweaks you make after you've written the manuscript, you have to very carefully go through your manuscript and change anything that's relevant, including any reference sections at the back. Don't forget those. Right, let's go on to the last section of the course, apart from the bonus one that I'm going to send out later. Surviving feedback. In the first seminar, I talked about the importance of humility in game design. and how it's very important to not have an ego, if possible, and how it's important to think about, your mental state. And I think I want to come back to that, because one of the most challenging things in game design is putting your designs in front of people and having them give you feedback. Because in the act of designing a game, you are going to be seeking constant, copious feedback. The only way you can get your game to be good is through feedback. And people aren't always great at giving it in a way which will feel good. And it can be challenging. So let's cap this whole 6 weeks of fun off with a little look at ways to help you maintain a positive mental state. It says that feedback isn't always fun. You will get feedback on everything. Stuff you're not expecting, stuff you don't want. You'll get feedback that's delivered poorly. I've had people start shouting at me, like arguing with me that I'm wrong for having put something into a game. Specifically, I had one person shout at me that I should be thinking about graphic design at this stage, because even though I was in early mechanical builds doing a guided playtest, and I'd said at the start very clearly, the graphic design doesn't matter. I've thrown it together very quickly. Light's gone again. Hang on, let me just remove the yellow from behind me. It's not doing anything, is it? There we go. Let's get rid of the chroma key. Sorry about this. Turn off the color kit. There we go. You can just have me on a green background. It'll look a little bit less horrific and distracting. And so I'd said at the start, graphic design isn't the thing we're looking at right now, so just focus on the gameplay. And we had what was almost like a 5-minute shouting match, and because he thought it was really important that I should look at the graphic design at that stage. And in hindsight, had I been a more experienced designer, I would have stopped him and said, "That's great, thank you. I'll take your feedback on board. Let's carry on." But I felt the need to argue. Whatever the case, feedback will not always be a fun experience. So how do you get through it? How do you weather it? Because really, you must weather the feedback. First of all, whatever it is, however it's delivered, whatever it's about, you have to thank your playtesters and write it down. They have volunteered their time to come and help you test your game. Now, if, for example, you're using a paid playtesting service, I don't rate them myself. I think there are a lot of issues with the concept of paid playtesting, but if you're using that and the feedback they're giving you is not useful, then by all means, tell them that. But generally, if they've volunteered their time to help you playtest your game, thank them, note it down, don't argue with it. Don't give knee-jerk responses. We've talked about this in terms of iterating your game, but it also comes in terms of taking feedback. I've seen too many designers who receive a piece of feedback at the table and immediately say, "Oh, no, that's wrong," or, "Oh, no, I don't think that's an issue." And that can come from defensiveness. It can come from other things as well. But whatever the case, you can't dismiss feedback because your gut tells you in the moment that it's wrong. Because, as I've said before, you will have biases, you'll have blind spots. Other people have insights in your game that you do not have. Like myth number 1 said, you're not the guru, right? If things get heated and you need to take a minute, just call a break. Let's have 5 minutes. Let's go get a drink. Let's go have a quick walk outside, and then we'll come back and play some more. There's no point risking your mental state, the atmosphere of the room, whatever else, because a piece of feedback has been given that you don't agree with. I'm going to introduce you to the Confidometer. That's trademark pending. This is basically confidence is really key when you're taking feedback. Confidence is the thing that will help you take it on the chin. And, you need to be confident in the game you've written, confident that you know your game, okay? But confidence is a balancing act. If you haven't got enough of it, you can easily become defensive because you have your own concerns about the game. And when you see them projected out by your playtesters, you can intercept them and become defensive and go, "Oh, no, that's wrong because of this, this, and this. I've already thought it through." If you're too confident, you can be cocky, you can dismiss feedback quickly. So you always want to try to be in the middle of that meter there, yeah? So how do you move the needle that way? How do you increase your confidence? Well, remember, first and foremost, that failure is part of the process. You need to fail. Failure is good. Failure is what you want out of a playtest. You want things to go wrong because you want to spot the things that you can fix. The thing to remember is that your playtesters are part of the design process. They're part of the design team. They're working on the game with you. They want the game to do well, so that when it goes out to anyone who plays it as a consumer, whether they're downloading it free online, they're playing it at an event, they're buying it off the shelf potentially, the playtesters are there to make sure that final end user, that final consumer, has a good time. So you are looking for failure, and they are on your team. Okay, make sure, thinking of the 3 levels of testing, right? You are testing things before you give them to your playtesters. Don't embarrass yourself by writing some stuff, making some knee-jerk changes before a test, giving it to your testers, and then having them go, "Oh, shouldn't this tell me to roll a dice now?" or something really obvious. And you go, "Oh, it should, yeah." Make the change, have a dry run yourself before you put it in front of anyone else, because that will give you the confidence. Especially if you run through exactly what you're going to get them to do, and then you give it to them, you can kind of get your head around it completely behind closed doors and make sure you're comfortable. And finally, there, accept that I don't know is a valid reply, or that's a great point, I'll look into that later. You don't need to blag an answer. If someone says, "Why is this rule here?" As someone said to me once during a Hellboy playtest, asked me to justify why a particular thing was in the game. And I think he was genuinely concerned that it was something that didn't quite make sense. And I immediately went on the defensive because I couldn't immediately justify the reasons there. And in that moment, I suddenly realized I could actually say, "I don't know." And I said, "You know what? I actually don't know. I'll come back to you with an answer." And I just came back to him with an answer about a week later, having thought it through. And my reply, I think, was along the lines of, "Yeah, I don't know why," and we're taking it out. But yeah, you don't have to have an answer for everything. If you're too far down the confidence scale and you find you need to go back that way, again, remember that failure is part of the process. You are here to fail. If you think your game is incredible and amazing, you're the best designer ever, what's the point of playtesting? You want to be testing in order to find failure. Listen to your testers. Don't just go through the motions. Give them a fair chance to give feedback and listen to it and take it on board. Write it down. Ask questions before you assume something is wrong. If you find yourself having the urge to tell a playtester their feedback is incorrect, instead change that and ask them why they think that, and drill down, get to the root cause, because there might be something that, even though you disagree with a symptom, there might be something the root cause actually is an issue. And then if nothing else, ask yourself why they came to those conclusions. Why did they think that is an issue? I don't think it is. Why do they think it is? And again, that'll help you identify your own blind spots and biases. As I said, you're not the guru, and they're doing you a favor. Most importantly, though, be honest with yourself. Game design is a constant cycle of failure and recovery. You will not progress through the cycle or through the process of game design unless you can fail and you can do it and pick yourself back up and get going. Writing a first draft is really easy about anything. The hard work is in testing, iterating, and improving. If you deny that there's an issue, whether that's in testing or in anything else, all you're doing is you're kicking the can down the road, and you'll come back to it later. And by that point, it might be too late to fix it. You might have already done around it, and your deadline might be approaching if you said that, and you realize, "Oh, actually, yeah, I can't do this time," and that will be bad. So don't do that. Be honest with yourself. Make sure you know that you need to fail in order to get good at this game design process. Sorry, I've been reading a lot about Dark Souls lately. You need to fail in order to get good at this game. It's just a statement that just came unbidden from my mouth. Anyway, there we go. That is the end of that. Any final questions? And if not, I've got one final exercise for you, and this is a special exercise. No, I shall move on. So the last exercise, here it is. The exercise here, the aim is to bounce back from something. And this is a delayed exercise. The first part of it is to go back to that checklist. It'll be slide 26 in the PDF, this one here. Print it out and stick it up on your wall wherever you design games. As I said earlier, laminate it if you want to. Keep it there. Keep half an eye on it, and bear it in mind. But mainly, this exercise begins the next time your game design project grinds to a halt. Whatever it is, whatever it may be, whether it's the simplest game, whether it's the game you're currently working on, whether it's a game in 5 years that you're working on, if you reach that point where you've hit creative block and you're getting no further, turn to that list, run through it. Before you do, go to the Discord server, if it's still there in 5 years, whenever it is you do this, and tell us that you've hit a stumbling block and you're going to go look at the checklist. And what will probably happen is everyone will rally round and give you advice and ask you to tell them the problem. But before they do, go through the checklist and go through it one item at a time. Ask yourself those questions. That says take a breather first. Take a few minutes, hours, days, whatever it might take to get your breath back and reclaim the passion for that project. And then, go through the checklist and let us know what it is that helps you get back on track. And with that, we are done. I'm going to slightly undercut this by then going and recording another short video with things you can do once you've designed a game. But think of that as bonus content. That's a DVD special feature. Most importantly, we are done. That is 6 parts of Game Design Online. I hope it has been useful. I hope you've learned some stuff. I've enjoyed running it. Wish my light had lasted to the end. This feels a bit anticlimactic. But thank you so much. Secret Part 7 will be on its way out to you very shortly. And if you have enjoyed this, please do tell people. I'll be making this course, a truncated version of it or a recorded version of it available to people through the website after the fact. So if you have any friends who want to do it, let them know they can come and do so. And I'm going to go have a very quick trip to the bathroom, grab another glass of water, and I'll be on Discord in about 5 minutes if anyone would like to come and join me for a chat. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop recording.